This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to the BiCurean podcast, where we explore and embrace the seeming contradictions of life. What actually is BiCurean, you ask?
While you may not necessarily have a mental concept of BiCurean, partially maybe because it's a made-up word, you embody it. What's happening right now in terms of the divisions between us is a focus on that which is different.
And lack of understanding and empathy for people's beliefs is no longer an excuse.
And it is in the differences we carry in ourselves that we find the BiCurean moment.
When you really dig into something, you're going to see some depth to it. It's not just a race thing. It's not just a conservation thing.
It's letting go of the or to make room for the and. We embrace all of you. Welcome to the BiCurean.
Welcome to the show. I am Eric.
And I'm Aicila.
And this week we have a special guest who's actually in studio, which is fantastic. We always love having the interaction that we can see across the table or next to us. But Theo Wilson, whom we first saw 2 years ago now at I think so. At a white privilege symposium that we had wanted to attend, and it was fantastic, and you were definitely one of the highlights, so perhaps you can tell our listeners about yourself.
Thank you very much for inviting me on here. I'm just a poet that became an activist, that became a speaker, and the through line is if I have the opportunity to share ideas that can change the world, then I will do it and do it in the most compelling fashion that I can. And that got me a lot of invites and a lot of doors opened. And this is a result of one of those. You saw me at the symposium. I didn't necessarily know what to expect because...
It was my first one. I didn't either, and I was really impressed.
Right. I was very happy at how people were willing to get real with the difficult things about these topics and do some real reflective soul searching. In my experience, walking through the world in my flesh, there needs to be more of that, but I was happy to see that it was at least talked about in an honest way and people wanted to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I really felt like I was able to have some real honest conversations. And I went there with the idea of like, look, I get that there's certain things I need to own about my skin color and the privileges that I have. But can you tell me what I can do? Because that's what I need help with. And I actually found that answer from a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different skin tones. It was really, really refreshing to just hear like, look, there might be a way to actually, like, acknowledgement is the first step, but we can also start talking about step 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of those things that I saw unpacked there. And that makes people feel empowered. And when people feel empowered, they want to continue to do the work.
I left feeling like, man, we can all make a difference. And we all see eye to eye.
Right.
Fundamentally. At least, I know I was there. And so have something in common to even be there. But I totally got what people were saying. And it wasn't blame. It wasn't, guilt. It was... These are the things. And actually, it kind of coins something that I have carried with me, this idea of what does my privilege mean I can do to help?
Right. I was about to say that. All of this has been an ask for help. All of this has been an invite back into humanity from the idea of whiteness. And seeing that the place in the human family that people of European descent can have is awesome if you want to blend with us rather than being like superior. You see what I'm saying? Like letting go of that because it's a heavy thing to hold.
Especially when you don't realize you are.
Yeah, right. When you're holding the very token, but the golden baton of empire.
Yeah.
Inherited from generation to generation.
Yeah. And,
told not to look at where it came from, where it was forged from. And so that's what all of this activism has been, especially into ally spaces.
Yeah, totally.
Wow. And so one of the things, you talked about it a little bit, and I would love if you can share what the motivator was for you to go from poetry to activism. I can imagine that the experience of your life would be enough, and I'm wondering if there was like a specific turning point or just a moment of noticing that you had an ability or...
Yeah, it was summer of 2011. 2011 was a game changer because that was the summer that I won the National Poetry Slam. So I was kind of at the top of the pile of all the spoken word artists. National Poetry Slam was the largest spoken word slam competition in the country. Slam Nuba Denver won the competition, and I was the champion of that team that year. Also that year, my boy Alonzo Ashley got killed by the police. He got tased to death at the Denver Zoo. And I remember thinking that I'm so compelling with these words, and that's cool, but I have to do more. So that summer, at the end of that summer, I got contacted by a friend of mine who had wanted to resurrect an idea that we did back in the day, actually. But I let it go. But now it was seeming like there was a time to reinvigorate Shop Talk Live, which we called Barbershop Talk at the time. And just using the barbershop as a symposium, as a forum for Black men to just do some group therapy and heal and connect.
Yeah.
You know,
it's actually, we were talking about that because that had come up when we saw you talk the first time. And I've watched Luke Cage, it's on Netflix, right? But where's the center of that, right, is the barbershop. And so I started to get like, think this is a cultural thing, and I'm actually kind of picking up on it. Maybe you could tell us, because she had questions about it and hadn't seen that stuff, like what the barbershop has meant and why that will have some meaning to certain people.
Yeah, the Black Barbershop specifically is a safe zone, and it's freedom of opinion. If you go in there on any given day, brothers are letting it all hang out. They're saying stuff. They're arguing over sports teams, boxers, women, you name it, cars. But so it's a place where the barber is kind of like a therapist in a way. As they're cutting your hair, it's you talking, them listening, almost like how sometimes a bartender could be, you know what I mean? Kind of on that level. And so we just decided to organize that. It was already going on. So we got the buy-in from the barbershop owners, and they decided that for a Wednesday or a Monday that they would lend us the place and we would have the discussions that were necessary. And brothers are used to talking anyway, so we just made them, understand that this is dedicated to this topic that night.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about the accessibility of podcasting is that it brings a lot of that kind of stuff more forward. There's one of our guests a few weeks ago was from another podcast called Off the Record, and it's 4 Black men who are talking about things you talk at the barbershop about. Right. And there's another one that is doing the same thing.
And they're out of Baltimore.
Yeah, they're out of Baltimore, and
okay.
And their show is great. I highly recommend listening to it. Like, they're just doing some really powerful stuff. But it was just one of those things where I was like, wow, like here I am, a white girl from the suburbs, and there's this Black cultural reference that is suddenly way more accessible because these people have access now. They don't need to try and get a studio to accept them. Right. They can step in and just do their story the way they want to. And that's something about, as much as I hate a lot of things about where the internet is, that accessibility to voice feels like such a gift.
Mm-hmm. It's organic and it's not controlled as of yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. And there's pluses and minuses to it. So
correct.
We try to be a positive voice as best we can. Mm-hmm. Offset something negative somewhere.
We listened to your more recent TED Talk right before you got here. And there are a couple of, actually the whole thing, once again, we'll link to it in the show notes. People should definitely watch it.
For sure.
And, but you're talking about toxic masculinity versus, and we did a show about positive masculinity, but I really liked kind of how you framed that. And when there's a moment when you were talking about every woman is in jail, and just both of us were like hit by that. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about sort of what you've discovered about masculinity and its positiveness, and then maybe some of that, how you wrestle with that privilege or...
Yeah, as a Black man, you have your own set of obstacles to overcome based upon how the country has historically treated you. But you never, at least many of us never, unpacked what it was to be in the position of privilege in context of our women and our relationship towards patriarchy in this society. The bottom line is, even in Black Christian households, it's the man is the head of the house, and that's expected. It's demanded.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that comes with a varying degree of toxicity depending on the evolution of the man. So, you know, especially back in the day, it was almost expected that one or two of the guys in your crew was going to be beating up on this woman. It was like, that's what happens sometimes. Just how bad is he beating up on this woman is the thing, you see? And we have had that pass under the radar because our version of masculinity is a mirror image of what we learned from white men. We've been divorced from our cultural context of African masculinity since the plantation, since the ship. So we picked that up environmentally. You sometimes forget that in the pop culture of like my dad's era, there was no black masculinity on television and in the movies. It was all John Wayne and Cary Grant. You see what I'm saying? And Humphrey Bogart and whoever was the badass at that time. So that was what was modeled. And you go look at some of the old movies back in the 50s, and the good guy will slap a woman across the room.
Somebody made a joke the other day about the pow right in the kisser thing. From, you know, or to the
pow
moon.
right in the kisser. One of these
That's
days.
like from the 30s, and
Right.
that became the model of even like the 50s.
Right.
White. Like view of what, you know, relationships were. And it's, you know, there was never the violent scene.
Right.
You never actually saw him hit her. Right. But it was implied.
Which is actually a more powerful form of storytelling. Like,
Right.
let's be honest, because
no,
then
I
you
mean-
create it in your head.
I don't envy what you picked up learning from it. There's like white people, all people have kind of picked up. Like culturally, we have celebrated that while also saying, like almost just excusing it, like, well, I wouldn't really hit her.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, in my relationship currently, like, I made it a point, I don't even joke about, like, doing bad things to her. I don't even form my words to say it in jest. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I've, you know, been...
Words become real.
Yeah, and I don't even do it. You know what I mean? And so that's one of those things where... So beneath the radar, this culture of patriarchy has existed. And when I started trying to look at the world through the lens of black women, they endured racism like we did. Quiet as is kept, they've endured police violence the way that we have as well. Not to the same frequency, but it's definitely something they had to think about. Lynch mob culture, they were victims of too. And then the domestic component. Then the constant heartbreak from our rampant infidelity, even with some of our leaders, to the point where their culture, in black female culture, has almost formed in an adaptive way to negotiate that landscape. And it's just one of those things where men then react to that adaptation and we forget who the originating force was for the negativity.
Yeah.
And if we really want to stop it, us men have to examine it, even though in another respect we are oppressed. Privilege is a spectrum. You know what I mean? So that's what I had to examine.
Well, and I feel like what you said about like African masculinity, like, and cultural connection, I feel like that is so important to really note that when we are not able to be connected to who we are, even like to a certain extent to the earth that we come from,
Right.
there's something missing. And then in addition to that, to have other, you know, super flawed examples shown, it makes sense that pain creates more pain, right?
Correct. Yeah. Hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people.
That's the bully story, right? Usually they're getting it rougher than what they're giving out.
Yeah. And so when black women like adopted feminism after the 60s on into the 70s.
You know, along with the whole civil rights thing.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, right? You know, because you talk to a lot of activists, black women activists back then, there was like a choice of should I fight for being black or should I fight for being a woman? A lot of them chose, I got to fight this black thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now more recently, some of them are like, nah, but this feminine thing is the thing. And a lot of brothers took offense to it. I remember, because I've got a pretty active Facebook page, I posted that I think black women might be more oppressed than us. And these brothers lost their mind. They were so upset that I would even suggest that I would examine that sacred cow that traditionally in a certain way is true for us, but also it's very difficult for us to examine our role as oppressors.
Yeah.
And when we do, it gets ugly.
Well, there's like a guilt. And that's kind of what I was hinting at about, like, I feel like it took me some courage to go to a privileged conference, not knowing for sure that I wasn't going to have some hostility towards me as a white man. And the reality is it was perfect and it was wonderful and it was good. But I have those conversations with people about, you're a white man, or even sometimes you're a white woman, you're better off than other people. And they react viscerally. Right. Because it's hard to admit, especially when it's not something you think you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and guilt is a way to avoid the topic. I mean, it's a way to, in any situation, if I react to something, if you tell me that I hurt you in some way, just person to person, let alone institutionally, I have to actually step into being vulnerable and listening to you. That's my job, right? If I actually want to come to reconciliation.
Well, yeah.
And if I decide to go into guilt, all I'm doing is I'm creating a way to make the topic about me.
Right. And and so my examination of the guilt, and see, like, a lot of it is synonyms and semantics. Guilt, in terms of, you're talking about, I perceive the very thing that you're talking about, I perceive that as shame.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
You feel me? And so I'm this is not like a correct. It's actually it's just that, and this is why how I make the distinction between them. And my world, you tell me if this makes sense to you. I was told that guilt is kind of a good thing to a certain extent. It's your own moral compass saying, I'm off course and I should course correct. And guilt seeks to right a wrong. Shame seeks to hide it. Shame seeks to suppress it. If you're ashamed of something, it's something that you don't want anybody to see. And my experience with that is, if you don't have guilt, you're a sociopath, first of all. Like, if you don't have guilt, you're a functioning psychopath. So I think that guilt, to a certain extent, is good. What we're talking about is a culture of shame and hiding. And
ignoring.
And ignoring and deflecting.
And pretending that it's not there and it's okay.
Right. And so that is the thing that needs to be examined. But I think we're on the same page. It was just like the words we're using can be synonyms.
I like that because
I think that's a good distinction.
Well, and guilt, and you have the turn of phrase to guilt someone into doing something. And it has had a little bit of a negative thing, but I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you don't feel bad for cutting that guy off in traffic and you knew what you were doing.
And you knew
like,
what you was doing.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is shame, I think, like you said. And that's the thing. I think people are ashamed, but they're ashamed for something they didn't actually have anything directly involved in.
Right.
And that's where getting them to see, look, you don't have to run around. Acknowledge it.
Right.
Acknowledge that it was a really crappy thing. Yeah. And then let's just move forward to what we could do to help.
Yeah.
What can you actually do in your job, in your friend group, to not promote this stuff? It actually brings up the other question we kind of wanted to touch on, because when we first saw you, were talking about how you had worked with and kind of infiltrated some alt-right groups. And I feel like that's that sort of extreme version of shame lashing out.
Right.
And so maybe you could just kind of tell a little bit of that. We'll post up to that TED Talk as well.
Yeah. So the alt-right experiment, it drew me in. I didn't go in like, okay, now I'm going to do something badass. It wasn't like that. It was just like, this is crazy. What are they talking about now? What are they talking about now? Keep in mind, when I did this, it was 2015 going on into 2016. So Barack Obama was still president at this time. And we didn't know if Trump could win. There were still other candidates on the field at this point. And there was just the idea that there's a growing movement and these guys are starting to say some of the same things. And there was the ascension of the Black Lives Matter hashtag and I guess movement, but there was the discussion, the discourse around Black lives, and then the backlash to that discourse. And that's what drew me into it, because I was getting trolled on my page. And what was so interesting is that my trolls were giving me the same data. Like, they were giving me the same false information.
Yeah.
And I was like, what world do y'all live in? This is crazy. Like, there's no way. Like, and you're not even examining the obvious flaws in the logic. And it pulled me into a space where I started to unpack that there was a shadow. And this shadow is something that, like, is reemerging for me for my examination. This shadow in white America is a very powerful thing that pop culture and polite culture has not fully grasped the depth and the darkness of this shadow. And I'm starting to see like this is what's really in the way, because for all of the open-minded, self-reflecting people of European descent, because white is a term that humans of European descent and ancestry, you know what I mean? Yeah. A great many of whom are the descendants of latter-day immigrants from poor European countries and stock. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Who were assimilated into a power culture that was created for them to forget where they were from and to exert power over those who were not them here. That forgetting came at a price, and it came with a talisman, as Ta-Nehisi Coates calls it, an inheritance that has teeth, man. And it's like a pit bull. It bit down so hard that it can't open its jaws anymore. And that's what I'm seeing in the far extreme break from reality. I'm seeing in a lot of Trump supporters. I'm seeing the same divorce from facts and logic that it took to even craft the idea of white supremacy. And we ain't really got to the bottom of that yet. And that's what I'm trying to like, how deep is this damn root, you know?
Yeah.
It's terrifying to me. I mean,
yeah.
You kind of infiltrated and stared interacting with them.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to do that, and I'm not black.
Right. So here's what happened. I remember that there was a website back in the day called Stormfront, was turned into the Daily Stormer, and at my job I was like taking calls, and it was hella space between calls. So I tried to go to the Daily Stormer, and it was blocked on my job's firewalls. But a site that wasn't blocked was YouTube. And so all of these racist websites, they had YouTube channels. So no matter if you couldn't see the actual site, you could see their actual channel. And that's when I was able to start to absorb the content. And YouTube's algorithm, it changed shit together. So after a while, I started learning where some of the chat groups were. I started learning what some of the talking points were, and started learning what the fears were behind it. And I looked at it as reconnaissance, man. I looked at it as like, this is a force that threatens me as a black man. So I got
best to know what's going on.
I got to see what's going on because it endangers me. So.
And literally in a scary way. Like this stuff I see them saying, like I said, I'm not joking about that. Like I wouldn't want to interact with most of those people, and I got no obvious physical traits they hate.
Yeah, right. So, you know, I did it through an avatar, you know, of course. And it was just about figuring out what the program that they were running on was. What was the code of that program psychologically? And what was the outcome if it were ever to be acted upon? I called Charlottesville. I called it 9 months before it happened in a video that I made called Warning to the Alt-Right that I released in November of 2016. I released this video, Warning to the Alt-Right, on my YouTube channel. It was, you know, Trump had just been elected and there was a spike in hate crimes. And I said, mark my words, you're going to implode. You're going to fall apart. And here's why. You're letting too many crazies into your organization. You let them into your movement. You're letting them into your spaces. And if they act out, somebody's going to act an ass and screw up. And you're going to turn public sentiment against you, even with all this momentum you got. I called it. It is time-stamped on the internet.
Yeah.
And then Charlottesville happened 9 months later. And I was like, duh, fool. Come on, man. You know, so yeah.
Well, and I mean, you're talking about it in I don't want to diminish that it's harmful to Black people. Yeah. I also feel like it's actually just harmful to everyone. And that's a place that I feel like it's important to stand, that when I'm speaking with other white people about the effect of slavery and racism, it's really important to me to acknowledge that we are harmed by having people in our culture who are held back. Like, if the people in our culture who are held back by their traits, and I actually want to say by the stigma of their traits, because there's nothing actually problematic with being an immigrant or being Black or being a woman. The stigma that we deal with, the discrimination that we can deal with because of those things is the problem. And that stigma is the responsibility of everybody to address, and we all benefit. Because what if every Black person in America could use all the energy they use every day to survive and to deal and put on the armor and all of the things they have to watch out for to innovate and raise their kids and create and invent? Like, what would we have if that energy was going towards building something instead of constantly fighting against a stigma that isn't actually their problem? They bear the burden of it. It's everybody's problem.
Right. I think that you hit the nail on the head. And I say in my speeches I give, America pays a cosmic price that it doesn't even know about, because, I begin by saying, I wonder how many inventors, doctors, engineers, and, scientists hung from southern trees in the South.
Yeah.
And what could they have created had they not been hanging from those trees? If maybe the dad was a carpenter, but he came home and taught the boy or the girl to be a little bit more than that, what could that child have been had the dad been allowed to come home? We don't know the price we're paying, and we are impoverished by that, not only materially, but I would say socially. And what's so sad about it is that they don't want to know. So this is where the shadow come in, because to these people who have this very, the Buddhists call it attachment. It is an unhealthy attachment to something that is impermanent anyway. We're talking about the flesh here. This is impermanent. This is adaptations to environments. That's it. And they're only as deep as family traits. Like, look at this. Like, my mama's side of the family is lighter skinned than my dad's side of the family. If you keep that spectrum going, somebody gonna be white. My dad's side of the family darker than my mom's. Keep that spectrum going, somebody gonna be Black, African. You see what I'm saying?
I have a friend. They're from Trinidad.
Yeah.
She's a little darker than her sisters are lighter. Her dad's almost white. There's so much with their Indian and African descent. Like,
right.
It's so intriguing to me to see. And I was really made aware. She pointed out something that, like, she has a bit of a rougher time being darker than her sisters, who are slightly whiter. Yeah. Her sister married a white guy, and the kids look very white. So they don't, like, at the school, the other parents and teachers don't even know what to make of a Black woman picking up white-looking kids.
Right.
I had no idea even
That's
about,
called
like,
colorism, yeah.
Yeah, even that level. And she brought that up and reminded me.
Yeah, and look at this. We're all in the same family, literally.
Yeah.
Literally. Now, look at this. So you're right. What you said, it's not the actual physical traits that's the problem. It's the stigma, or what I call the cultural mythology around it. It's a group hallucination. But those folks is so attached to that group hallucination that any Black prosperity, thriving, happiness incenses them at a level we don't understand. When there are people who look at Barack Obama, like, I remember inauguration night, 08. I mean, not inauguration night, but election night, 08. And Obama looked like Prince Charming. Brought Michelle on that stage, looked like a chocolate queen. Yeah. And they're dancing all slow, and it's the most gorgeous, melanated, beautiful thing. And some people turn fucking Hades hair on fire. And if they're in power, they do something about it. And we don't get it, because those of us who don't have that, no matter what race you are, don't see that level of envy, of rage, and that fear of Black happiness, prosperity, joy, magic, whatever you call it, causes a backlash that is cyclical in this country. Literally, you can track every gain in Black life is followed by a swing of the pendulum the other direction every single time.
That is what everything that happened with Trump coming in felt like to me.
Come on. And
like bad.
Yeah. And you can actually track it. Emancipation happens 1865. Then there's this thing that people don't talk about, which is the Reconstruction era. The beginning of the Reconstruction era sucked. It was a bloodbath. The end of the Reconstruction era, there were literally writings talking about this being post-racial America in 1876. Can you imagine that, right? Betrayal of 1877 happens. Northern troops get withdrawn from the South. That's when you have the beginning of Jim Crow.
Yeah.
That's when you have the beginning of Jim Crow, right? Booker T. Washington comes along, says if we can't live with them, then we'll build our own stuff. By the 19-teens and 1920s, there are thriving black metropolises due to segregation all around the country. They get burned down.
Yeah.
And then you have the civil rights movement, where it's like, okay, we can't be segregated. We definitely have to integrate. Gains are won. Lyndon Baines Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act in 1964 into law. Shortly after that, you have the higher prosecution of drug crimes and the influx of crack cocaine in the community when brothers can't get that kind of shit across the border. Yeah. And then you have this freaking integration era, the Oprah era, culminating with Obama. And then you have this. There's always this pendulum swing that happens whenever there's a gain in black life. And we haven't been able to calculate the depth of envy, wrath, and just diabolical rage that black progress provokes in certain people. And that is scary for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't even think you need to know all of the details to look at that the Civil War ended in the 1860s and rights for black people happened in the 1960s. That's 100 years of gray area everyone should wonder about.
That's a fair thing. That's a really good way to break that down, because
at best it's a gray area. At worst it's a lot of stories that people, again, their reaction will be shame.
Yeah.
I hope.
Exactly. And so how do you address the shame? You got to understand, this is where I brought something different to the table, and I didn't realize how powerful this was when I talk to people, because this is just something I used to cope anyway. It's a somewhat spiritual understanding of the inner mechanics of folks, and I studied this dude, y'all probably heard of him, called Eckhart Tolle. Y'all ever heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah.
So he talk about the pain body, right? And the pain body is literally a trauma neural network. That's what it physically is. It shows up almost like a possession. It almost shows up like a spirit. Like, you get to know somebody, like, this person's awesome, and then something happens in their life and like, who the fuck is this?
Yeah.
That's the pain body. And there are individual pain bodies and there are collective pain bodies. And so the pain body of black folks comes from being victims. So that, like, slavery was not a victimless crime. We literally were the victims of that shit. Like, that's facts, right? But we sometimes see the world through that lens. Well, the pain body of white folks doesn't get examined, but that pain body is the shame thing. Like we know it colloquially as quote unquote white guilt, but that is a defense mechanism to protect the emotional life of somebody who was given what I call the talisman of take the empire and run. You see what I'm saying? And there's a whole mythos behind that. But anyway, I go on about that forever, but yeah.
And I would absolutely love to hear all of that. In fact, that kind of begs a question that I have. So we've talked about these things, and we're going to let people know to go and watch them. I highly recommend everyone go and check out those previous TED Talks. What do you got going on now?
So now I am set forth to write a new TED Talk, TED Grand Junction. And I'm talking about the tipping point in the browning of America. We got the census coming up this year.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And that data is going to make a lot of people upset. And I say to myself, because the lady who's in charge, like, we had a conversation and she was like, what do you think the future of people of color is in America? Well, the demographers say we are the future of America, but how we fare in America depends directly upon how white folks react to that, because it is what's called the Thucydides trap. When one empire emerges and challenges the dominant one, even if they're not directly in conflict, there tends to be war. That's the same thing you see happening with America and China right now. Not directly competing, kind of, but then the one on top don't like being challenged by that, right? The things that make people of color an emerging population in the country have nothing to do with us being against white people. That has nothing to do with it.
What's that idea, right? That people keep coming up with, like, that something is being taken away, but nobody can say what.
Well, and it's we were talking to someone about it who work with youth and talking about how they were trying to make it so that when kids of color ran into some kind of issue, that they had better care, because a lot of times white kids get in trouble but then they don't end up getting, prosecuted or put into the system in a bad way. And she was talking about it, and she said the thing that was really frustrating to her was that people would perceive that as she wanted white kids to go to jail. She's like, no, I just want the black kids and the other kids of color to have the same compassion because I think kids, regardless of their skin color, deserve some compassion so they can make mistakes. And it was just really hard for people to get that wanting to help kids of color had absolutely nothing to do with white kids at all.
Right. And that's the shadow. That's the pain body, which is like a lens that distorts the light.
Yeah.
It's like literally this is what's happening, but it can't get through the lens because there is something in the way, clouding it, obstructing it. And if people aren't self-aware enough to realize, damn, I'm triggered. I'm looking through a lens that's actually distorting reality. Let me go ahead and calm these waters so I can see clearly. If you don't have that mechanism in you, then the program just takes over. And the program, if a lot of people have it, becomes a freaking culture. And that becomes dangerous if there's a weaponized majority. Because listen, we could become 80% of the population. That didn't stop whites from running South Africa. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so that, if it's just numbers, that's not going to count. It's all about power and resources. And we are not trying to do anything but survive. Like, nobody can understand that, at least not in the far right or extreme portions of white America. Black people didn't survive just to piss white people off. We did it because that's what we did. You see what I'm saying?
Basic human, animal, survive.
Yeah, like basic, powerful program of instinct.
Yeah.
Survive.
Yeah.
And have kids because that's what the fuck happens. You see what I'm saying? And as long as there is a lens that says that people of color are here to take from me, then we will be interpreted as the other and the enemy. And that can get ugly. Yep. And it will get uglier in time. Because the way that it's going, all of the far right extreme movements you're seeing all over the Western world. You know what I'm saying? You got Brexit, you got far right extreme parties raising up in Germany.
It's
again.
like a problem.
Yeah.
Like around the world. I thought maybe we just kind of had a nut job that got elected over here, and we had some of this roiling under the surface. But to see in Germany, that's scary.
In Italy, it's happening.
England, that whole element's there, and it's taken a different shape, but not really all that different in each of those countries. All
of these far-right extremist backlashes that we're seeing are happening in direct response to influxes of people of color. Here's the thing.
They call it globalization.
Globalization, right? So let's take Europe, for example. Europe is in an interesting position because it's a part of NATO, and there was an interesting thing that happened. 2011 was a hell of a year. Let's go back to 2011. In the year 2011, what we saw was the toppling of a lot of Arabic dictators in the Arab Spring.
The Arab Spring, yeah.
If you
fueled by Facebook, which is the last positive thing I've heard about Facebook
right.
in a while.
Right, but one of the things that happened in the Arab Spring was Libya. And NATO specifically openly backing the rebellion against Muammar Gaddafi. And Muammar Gaddafi said, if Libya falls, Europe will turn black. Because geopolitically, Libya was known as the cork of Africa. There's been a lot of chaos in Africa due to the colonization and them trying to find their way afterwards, right? Libya kept a lot of that in check. It's a powerful nation state right at the border of, the Mediterranean Sea. That collapses. And now the problem that they have in Europe is people crossing this vast ocean. This isn't the Rio Grande here. This is an ocean, and they're dying by the hundreds, and then they're making it over. Yeah. And then all the places that NATO bombed, we're talking about from Operation Iraqi Freedom, making all of these places unlivable with Western interference, makes people come a-knocking at your door. Now, the far right won't acknowledge that. I sometimes think right-wing ideology is there to cover up the dirty actions of empire, because that's what's really happening. But all these brown people are coming to Europe, and all these brown people are coming to America, and this far-right extremism is happening as a reaction to them going to these countries and the whites there not getting the full story of why they're there. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Germany straight up said that their problem is too many immigrants, which they're required to take based on treaties from World War II.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because last time Germany didn't take immigrants, shit went south fast, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was a problem.
Yeah. Well, and when I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good.
It's gone. I had a question. I want to put you on the spot.
No real problem. Go right ahead.
So your poetry is amazing.
Thank you.
Would you be willing to share one of them on the show?
It depends on which one you want me to share.
I would let you pick because you know best what you're familiar with and in the moment of being put on the spot.
Let's see. I got so many of them in the mental Rolodex. It's sometimes hard to pick which one in their long ass poems. You know what I'm saying?
I remember there was what was the one we heard?
We're happy to link. Do you have them up online anywhere? I want to link to some anyway. If they're shared,
I got a few of them
or for purchase or whatever.
Online, yeah, I got a few of them online, but
is there one relevant to the topic? Because I feel like there's one at the symposium. You shared.
Oh, I did. Oh, I totally shared that. Oh shit, that was a crazy poem.
There you go.
I was surprised they let me do that one, but it was the right place.
Yeah.
It's called POV, and it's like, in a world without justice or mercy, his life was destroyed, his assets stolen, his children taken from home. Now, Liam Neeson is basically every African since 1492. This summer, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you want, but I will find you and kill you, motherfucker. Taken for the boat ride. The world, according to Fox News' Ben Shapiro. Martin Luther King wanted us all to live together, but Colin Kaepernick clearly doesn't. I mean, sure, the Black Panthers did use violence like George Washington did, but at least he wasn't a racist. Look how many white slaves Beyonce owns. Chick's a total terrorist. Oh my God, Snowflake, another race poem? That's right, Ben. Because fighting oppression with prayer would not have given white folks the 4th of July. Because like all races, yes, blacks are more likely to die by each other's hand. This fact somehow deafens the world to our cries. As if after Pearl Harbor, the president could have lectured this wounded nation about American on American crime. That we had no right to be pissed at Japan at that moment, because what about Al Capone? If Bush even suggested turning the other cheek to bin Laden, a Christian's bullet would have clipped his ass before he left that microphone. Courtesy of Clive and Bundy, your heroes have always been violent, America. Smoking holes dot every I in your history, every T is slashed with a sword. If this were a fantasy film, you'd be rooting for black people. Like if instead of Africans, we were the elves enslaved by the orcs, and then suddenly, 400 years later, they're finally ready to kick some ass. You'd be like, that's a smidge overdue. Should be a continent full of Liam Neesons coming for you. Especially these racist millennials who never joined their dad on no lynch mob, don't know the smell of a burning Negro, but keep your nose high enough in the air to get hooked by Fox, by Trump, by the alt-right, who tells you that there's no blood on that silver spoon you sucking on in life. And this is the point that you're missing. We're not saying you personally killed the Indians, just that you fit the description. Psychologically, of those who went first-person shooter through indigenous environments. That's why POV don't stand for point of view. It stands for privilege of violence. That's why Muslims get blocked from boarding planes when you go to gun shows. Nobody stops it. Just say, genocide is wrong, except when I profit. Just say, blacks shouldn't fight back except during boxing. Just say that it was okay for President Truman to view Asians as a cancer, so we gave 2 entire cities chemotherapy. The flash from the nuclear bombs burned so bright, they turned all Japanimation characters white. And you still want to be the trigger man, my friend? Denying history's hate crime so you can reoffend ain't gonna fly like Trump in a wingsuit with Stormy Daniels strapped to his chin. We ain't saying we giving up on interracial love, motherfucker. Is look who get to draw first blood, motherfucker, because you prefer us living in a world without justice or mercy. Michael Brown didn't have to be armed to be dangerous. Their lives could be taken for nothing. Sandra Bland should have just followed directions. And if you think they're going to sit back and take it, this summer, you've got another thing coming. Motherfucker.
Wow.
That's
I
still
remember when you
amazing.
did that, and thank you.
No problem.
You so much.
Man, you are super talented. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back on different things. You know, this is the first episode of our third season, and we are getting to a point.
It's hard to equal this, right?
This is a great start, but I mean, and a friend of yours, Chet, we have on all the time. I would love to, you know, if we have something come up that was worth talking about, have you back, because it's been great.
And what usually Eric does this, but I'll take it on. What's an action that you think our listeners should? I should's the wrong word. What's an action you think our listeners could do?
Incorporate into their tomorrow.
I would say the best thing to do, and this is more difficult than it sounds, is to start being self-reflective around race. Start being self-reflective. I had to examine my biases too, and I invite you to do the same thing. Am I seeing this as it is, or am I seeing this distorted through my own lens? Am I seeing this person as they are, or am I seeing this distorted through my own lens? And try to figure out if you could just take their flesh off of them and listen to their voice and their heart. What's really going on here? Because at the end of the day, the tragedy of this race shit is that we are all human. That's the fucking tragedy. And that we lose each other's potentials and our hearts and our minds and the best parts of us when we judge each other by shit we can't control. That's what I would ask. Self-reflection.
That's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
No doubt. Thank you.
I'm Dakota Patterson. Some call me Chimp VX. I'm the host of the Fresh Brewed Coffee Podcast. The Fresh Brewed Coffee Podcast is not a feel-good podcast. It's a feel-something podcast. Having the tough conversations that we all may be too afraid to have while prioritizing creating a space for vulnerability and humanness. Join the conversation every other Wednesday for the Brew of the Day on Apple or Spotify. It's brewing time.
So that's going to be our show for the week. Obviously, when we have very compelling guests and run longer when we would rather listen to what they have to say, we usually skip our BiCurean moment. So join us next time for that.
And thanks for listening. If you have ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are BiCurean on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. You can also email us at podcast@BiCurean.com.
And if you like what we're doing, please rate us on your listening platform of choice.
Thank you.